Good morning, Indiana. Welcome to Who's Left This Week, a Sunday morning politics and talk show for our state without the MAGA bullshit and gaslighting. My name is Scott Aaron Rogers, and I am broadcasting from Bloomington. Today, on the agenda, we've got the attack on public education, Indiana. That is our one big thing. We'll be coming up on that in the last third of the show. Before then, in Indiana stories, Diego Morales is jet setting it up to no good again. Braun and Beckwith are taking food out of children's mouths. And at the national level, RFK Jr. is poisoning the well of public health. I've got a great panel here with me today. Let's welcome these folks in. First, new to our this week's show, but old friend Trish Whitcomb. How are you today, Trish?
Great. Good to be here. Thanks.
Thank you so much for being here. Another old friend and longtime Who's Left collaborator, Jesse Brown, Indianapolis City County Council District 13. Morning, Jesse.
Morning. Honored to be here. Good to see y'all.
So glad to have you. And back once again, Corinne Straight, filling in this week, pinch hitting with a last minute cancellation. Appreciate you very much. Glad to have you back.
Anytime, Scott. Thanks for asking me. I'm happy to be here.
So let's start with our national stories, as we do around here. And so I guess Elon Musk is leaving the federal government, came in with a bang, going out with a whimper. Is he even really gone? And that's, I guess, the first question I want to pose, and we will start with Trish. Trish, what do you think of Mr. Musk?
The damage he has done to our country is unfathomable. I also think that the companion story about his drug use and the chaos in his personal life just all point to the fact that our country is in the hands of people who don't know what the heck they're doing, and people are going to die because of his cuts. And he has caused so much disruption, and his own company is feeling the brunt of it. So I say good riddance to bad rubbish.
Yeah, for sure. Jesse, is he even gone? I mean, sure, maybe he might not be there every day, but like, I don't know, is Big Balls still digging through the treasury?
Well, that's the thing. Is like, is he gone? Was he there to begin with in any official capacity? He was this, weird, not real public official where technically his drug use wouldn't have violated policy since he wasn't an official employee. Nobody voted for him. Trump campaigned on a lot of heinous stuff, but this wasn't part of it. And so, yeah, I mean, like, how can you really feel like he's safely gone when he could just come back at any point and there doesn't seem to be any democratic oversight or accountability over that? So at the end of the day, as much as I love hating on Musk and, you'll never catch a socialist shedding tears for a billionaire, I want to remind everybody Trump's decision to put him in. So this is still Donald Trump who is responsible for all these cuts that, like Trish said, is going to kill people. Musk is a, fall boy. He's a scapegoat. He does the memes and the Hitler salutes and thinks it's a real funny time and tries to draw attention away from what Trump's doing, which is the MO, right? So try to avoid falling into that trap while also pointing out the horrific stuff that he's doing. And it's kind of a catch-22.
Yeah. Now, Corinne, like, he got what he wanted during his time there, right? It seems like all of these federal investigations into his company's shady business dealings and terrible safety record and everything else, shaking down foreign governments for Starlink deals.
The usual, yeah.
That seems to be what his goal was, and he accomplished it.
He absolutely did. I mean, talk about an Indiana connection. Just earlier this week, Todd Rokita now has a new graphic. Indiana's Attorney General has an Indiana Doge graphic that he is putting up on certain posts and certain victories that he is claiming for his office. We were just talking a little bit before we got started here about how much the MAGA crowd loves acronyms. So Indiana Doge, that resonates with people. And Elon did accomplish what he wanted to. I think it feels more as a ceremonial announcement, like, hey, I'm out, bye. But we have to remember, even without an official connection throughout the entire campaign post the 2020 election, Elon Musk and the Trump team have been working together very closely. So we have, the purchase of Twitter. All of this was very calculated to help the Trump campaign. So whether or not he is there in any official capacity, even as a subcontractor or anything, his influence is still going to be rippling through that administration.
Yeah. And always enabled by Republicans. And this is a thing that I think people need to remember. It isn't just Trump. It is the Republicans. There's no Republicans screaming out, don't let this interloper come in and do these things. So always, people need to remember the Republicans are enabling this behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Well, especially, I know we're talking national stuff right now, but like at the state level, the Indiana Doge is like, who's been in charge with supermajority control of every branch of government for decades? What government inefficiencies are you trying to find? And are you going to talk about how Republicans set those up? Yeah, it's just ridiculous.
Right? No, and Jesse, when you look at the post, it's like, what does this have to do with efficiency? It doesn't make any sense. It's just capitalizing on the goodwill that already exists from that name and that catchphrase.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I would say
it is. It's all branding, right?
Yep.
Yeah, the MO is they'll find some flashy branding. They'll jangle their keys in your face in one hand while they're picking your pocket with the other. They're just trying to trick you into being distracted. That's.
Oh man. Well, hey, speaking of branding and pocket picking, excuse me, our wonderful 47th president Donald Trump this week hosted at one of his golf properties a dinner for crypto investors who own large quantities of Trump's meme coin. I mean, listen, I don't know how the whole crypto thing really works. People I trust think it's all a scam. This particular crypto grift looks like open corruption and like soliciting foreign donors. Am I wrong, Jesse?
No, I think you're totally right. And this is one area where I think even Tony Katz will say it this way. He said Trump only operates with two rules. Number one, Trump wins. Number two, you can make a deal as long as number one stays true. And, like people have told me, like, I tried to talk with people, why did you vote for Trump? Tell me about that. And they've said, well, yeah, he's, a crook and he's, a jerk and everything, but he's the same person. And no matter whether the camera's on him or off, you trust that he's going to be acting the same way you can see him acting. And I think this is a good example of that, where like you could look at his business records for decades, and this is exactly how he's always operated. It's an obvious scam, and it doesn't, he's not trying to trick people into really believing in it. He's trying to get people to just willingly give him money in exchange for political favors. So it's textbook corruption. Nobody but a few marks at the bottom really thinks they're going to make money off of this, unless they make money because the government changes its rules just to give money back to them. So it's willingly enlisting as kind of a brown shirt at the bottom rung of the pyramid, and just saying, "Hey, I'm aligned with you, President Trump, and so I expect the state to work for me and against my enemies." So, like that's all Trump has ever done.
Yeah, no, I like the way you frame it. It's kind of like a crypto scheme. Yeah, only the people at a Ponzi scheme. Only the people at the very top, namely Trump himself, make any money on this thing, and all of the lower level folks make nothing. They're just in it for vibes, I guess. Corinne, you trade in the crypto?
I'm not. I am definitely not smart enough for that. I don't understand how any of that works. I have been doing a little bit of diving into crypto, not with my own money, but just trying to understand it. And it really does seem like the people who got into it in the very beginning actually did make some money, like legitimate money. It feels very pyramid scammy. It feels very MLM, because if you're in at the beginning, you do really well, and then you sell everybody else this false dream. Because I want to understand crypto, but it is like all other money, right? It's made up. We've made up money anyway. We've made up the value of, beaver pelts. We've made up the value of gold and diamonds and now the American dollar. So we're making up the value of things. And so I get that piece of it. But it is it's very frustrating. The other thing that I thought was, because, grifter's going to grift, right? No matter what the grift is, they're going to find it. But how many people, I don't know if y'all saw this, how many people showed up to that event covering their faces? It's very, Proud Boys were just marching in Kansas City, Missouri last week with all of their faces covered. And it's just like, God, the one opportunity you guys have to wear a mask, this is the one you're going to take? Not when it was a pandemic, but right now you're going to wear a mask? All right, thought you were not all about the masks. But people were showing up, and when they were getting out of their vehicles and going into the event, they didn't want their faces shown. And that's really weird. I don't know if that's part of the anonymous internet personality piece of it, but it's like, if you're so proud of this relationship you have with the president and this event, why are you hiding?
That's a very good question. Trish, I wanted to ask, do you think these guys are trying to replace the US dollar with crypto?
Well, yes, but what I find very troubling about all of this is, number one, it's the transaction fees that the Trump family is gaining. Whether the value of the coin goes up or down, it's the transaction fees. And in the transaction fees that were involved with all these people buying up the Trump coins to attend this event, they made $100 million on the transaction fees.
Right.
So that's number one. Second part of this is, I've been doing some investigation about underbanked and unbanked people, people who use Cash App or any of these other Chime and all these other things. They're alternatives to using the regular banking system. They are gravitating to cryptocurrency, maybe not the Trump, but any kind of cryptocurrency, because of maybe they can't get a bank account, or maybe they just find it easier or whatever. But that population of unbanked and underbanked individuals are mostly people of color and people of limited income. So once again, we see something happening in our country that is pulling the limited resources of working poor people up to the top. And that's what disturbs me the most. I mean, I don't care if, like, a person with disposable income wants to get involved with this and they lose their shirt. I could care less. But I am thinking about people who, because they cannot get a bank account, get into the cryptocurrency and lose whatever they have.
You are so right, Trish. Yeah. And it's super similar to somebody else.
I like that before.
Yeah, and it's super similar to somebody else we're going to talk about later this morning, RFK Jr. And I'm going to go ahead and show you that the current system is corrupt and not for you. Right. And here's an alternative.
Right.
And the alternative is always a way to make them more money. And because trading stocks and the bond market and all of this is really difficult to understand, they're going to present crypto to somebody like, hey, look, that was not for you. This is for you. I have the alternative, because that system was super corrupt when it's actually all corrupt.
Yeah, I was listening to a special on my 14-hour drive yesterday about Amway, and it all sounds like Amway. And Trish, you make a great observation. It's the coin mining. They're just mining the poor people, and it's a get rich quick scheme. The system has been rigged against you, poor little man. Here, invest in this vehicle, and you can get rich like me. And all it does is just.
Well, let me just jump in here, because when you talk about the servers that they need for these things, it's an energy suck. And we'll put this in connection with what happened in Indiana in the legislature this session. And Jesse, you and I talked about this. There's now an exemption for, construction work in progress is a premise that says ratepayers do not pay for construction work in progress. Now they will be paying for capacity that is built to serve large users.
Mm-hmm.
So all of this goes together. These big server farms that they need to mine the cryptocurrency, to do all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, the
It's
AI.
going to be the person who lives in an apartment for $800 a month and has a $75 a month utility bill is now going to be paying $125. And that's how it's going.
Right. And that means, I mean, this construction work in progress, the QUIP stuff, it means, sorry, I'm on the board of a Citizens Action Coalition as well.
Right.
So I'll take this opportunity to ring that bell. Yeah, they've been doing great work. And I saw Kerwin Olson just got on Project Next with Sarah to talk about a little bit of this stuff. But yeah, that means that you could just say, we're going to build this $1 billion, project to power a data center and start collecting money right now from our ratepayers to pay for that. Later on, they could decide, you know what, that's actually not a good investment. We're not going to go ahead with it.
Marble Hill.
Meanwhile, they've been collecting the money the whole time. Like it's
they're going to give that back, right? Right?
I mean, there's some clawbacks if they have to use it for something, but either way, this is a government mandated monopoly, right? You can't just say, well, screw this power company. I'm going to go and you go to this different electric company. You don't have options. And so we're supposed to have some regulations to protect us since we have this government mandated monopoly. And for the investor owned utilities, which is most of them in this state, they're guaranteed a rate of profit. So again, we are the product, right?
100%.
Yep.
And I mean, again, socialize the losses, socialize the development costs, and privatize the profits. That's
right.
We're not going to see, we the ratepayer are not going to see the financial gain from this.
Yeah. I do want to change lanes a little bit here and talk about international college students. So the Trump administration, regime, whatever we want to call them, going after Harvard. They've been doing this for the last several weeks. And this week, they're seeking to bar Harvard from admitting international students. Also, along these lines, Secretary of State Marco Rubio said that the United States will aggressively begin revoking the visas of Chinese students in the United States. Now, listen, I have a hard time putting myself into this mind space, but if I was going to put on my defense hawk brain cap, wouldn't you want these people in our country to, recruit as potential spies, or even just to extract the best minds out of your political rival and put them to work for yourself? What are we doing here? Corinne, I haven't started with you yet. What's your thoughts?
I have been really enjoying consuming content from journalists and other creators in these countries. So because we're only getting one slice of the pie here. And there are a couple of Chinese journalists that I have been following and Chinese economists. And their perspective on this is so fascinating to me. I liken it to, after I watched Oppenheimer, I actually went onto YouTube and I watched interviews of Japanese theater goers as they were exiting the movie theater and their thoughts. And that was that was a crazy experience. And so to listen to Chinese economists and journalists just say, we have been an unbelievable partner to the United States. We have allowed for innovation to happen in the US. There are so many examples of the cheap production. And of course, this is incredibly, Chinese labor and labor protections and the lack thereof is incredibly problematic. And we cannot overlook that. But at the same time, what the Chinese people are saying is we have given Americans an opportunity to innovate at a low cost. You try things out, you try the market, you get the goods from us. It's working for both of us. And that has been a lot of the message that has been coming out of other countries. I mean, even Turkey as well, Indonesia, we are producing things for you. This has been working for what has happened. Why are you trying to blow up this relationship? And so I can see it from from the national security side, like maybe this is dangerous, these people should not be in our country, but there's a reason they're coming here to study, and it's just to further enhance the relationship, because that, the generation of college students in their early 20s that are coming to the US to study, this is the only life they've ever known. They don't know a pre-China US trade relationship. So to come here and to want to study and to further that is just it's furthering the isolationism. It's furthering the be afraid of the other. And that's why I'm just like, okay, I need to stop listening to Marco Rubio. I need to go listen to some Chinese, academics and people talk about this, because it makes so much more sense to me to hear it from their perspective.
Oh man, that Corinne Strait's been compromised by the CCP.
Dude, I'm probably on so many lists already, y'all. Like, just add it to another one. Remember, it's 1 R and 2 N's. That they spell it wrong.
Yeah.
It's not gonna get me on the list.
Well, Trish, it sounds like the administration, Rubio, they want to make this thing like into some zero-sum game.
Yeah.
Both countries can benefit from this kind of exchange, right? What am I missing?
Not a thing. Educational exchange, cultural exchange has always been part of diplomacy. It's the same thing that we see happening with the dissolution of AID and the non-militaristic ways to engage. I mean, this is the whole thing about globalism. We are not, the United States is not just by itself. We need to understand the world around us. We already have relationships with these countries. We are hurting ourselves when we say no to foreign students, when we say no help to foreign countries, because as Corinne so eloquently pointed out, these relationships are the backbone of our economy. So if we're willing, as they say, to cut off our nose to spite our face and dissolve these relationships with foreign students, foreign countries, and the diplomacy that has served for 80 years, the benefit, the well-being of the world, then let's see how that turns out.
Yeah. Jesse, thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm a socialist and favor internationalism in terms of working class people of every country uniting to figure out how we can work things out better. And so I think everybody has said things that I agree with. Diplomacy should be all of us getting together in a room, sharing things from our perspective and figure out, okay, where do our interests align? How can we make things easier? How can we make things more just and fair? And yes, huge problems with authoritarianism in China, huge problems with workers' rights and their conditions. But you know what is the antidote to authoritarianism is free exchange of ideas, right? And so if we truly do have a problem with the CCP and how they, conduct things, the best way of undermining that and pushing for more democracy would be get more people to come into this, like city on a hill, if we want to still think of ourselves that way, right? And if we really believe in these Enlightenment ideas and, freedom of speech, et cetera, why don't we act like it and like let those, the domino theory could work the other way and we could have more democracy and bottom up control. But yeah, I mean, I don't think that there's any real thought to this other than typical, right-wing governments will always try to demonize outgroups. And, college students, even though they're providing huge amounts of economic growth, huge amounts of innovation and development, they don't have a lot of political power right now. And so Trump can just put those on the chopping block and show that he's doing something by aggressively attacking somebody who aren't voting in this country, so that's not going to hit him as directly at the polls, and he could look like he is attacking the enemies and protecting the real Americans, right? And I think that's what's going on.
Yeah. So along the lines of American isolationism and picking fights with potential trade partners and the rest of the world, tariff watch. This week, the weather vane is blowing, well, on, then off, then on again. A federal appeals court put a stay on all these Trump's tariffs earlier in the week, and then a Oh, sorry, that was from the Court of International Trade. Then a federal appeals court comes in and says, well, okay, well, the tariffs can stay in place for now after the regime complained. So I think we're back on at the moment. Our own the Hoosier economist emeritus, as I like to call him, Michael J. Hicks, wrote a interesting article in the Indy Star this week about tariffs and how they actually affect our day-to-day lives. Let's see, where are we? Well, we're back to Trish. Trish, you looking forward to paying those higher prices?
Well, I'm waiting for the price of eggs to come down. So I have been focusing on the tariffs thing, and there was a story of first-person account of a woman who has had her business for like 5 years, and so that she's past that usual threshold where businesses fail. If you've got it going for like 5 years, you're pretty much going to be okay. When she started out, she makes products for babies. Okay. So she started out and she could not get a manufacturer from the United States to do her small amount of manufacturing because she could only start with 1,000 units. She was self-funding, she was building her business. So over the years, she went to China and they said, oh yeah, we'll help you out. And so over the years, she has developed manufacturing relationships in China and Vietnam. With this last, increase in her business, she put her house on the line. When these tariffs came in, she said, I have 30 days of inventory and I cannot pay 145% tariff. I know this is happening to businesses in Indiana. I know that there are families with small businesses, even medium-sized businesses who are sitting around the table right now saying, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? We cannot pass these costs onto our customers. We cannot absorb them, but maybe they should take some comfort in taco. Because Trump always chickens out.
I take comfort in tacos.
In tacos we trust.
That's right.
So Jesse, how do you even begin to plan, right? So, Trish is talking about, we can't do this. So, we can't pass these costs on. We can't absorb these costs. Tomorrow, maybe they're off. The day after that, maybe they're on. How do you run a business this way?
Right. I think that's the biggest thing. I am not a free trade advocate, right? I'm a socialist. I don't think that the global, freedom of movement for capitalists and not for any humans is a good thing for us. I think NAFTA was a huge mistake and caused a bunch of problems. But I think Professor Hicks has put in other articles some interesting stats that I will admit I wasn't aware of, which is that, for example, manufacturing in Indiana is at an all-time high still. It's just that the jobs associated with manufacturing are not. And so if you actually want to increase, the vague, inchoate, I think, goal here is to get a lot of like blue collar jobs where, American men are going to roll up their sleeves and, work the tools and produce the big heavy industry things. And that's just like not a thing anymore, unless we want to work for $7 an hour or something like that. And so we still have manufacturing. It's just that it's mostly robots doing it. And so, I'm all for put economic controls that will take profits and reinvest them into people who need it, because I think when you circulate money among low-income people, it stays local, it stays in the community, it lifts people up, it saves the government from having to do, welfare stuff on the back end. So there's lots of things where I think maybe a tariff could make some sense. But a tariff only makes sense when it incentivizes you to run your business a certain way. And right now, it's not incentivizing you to do anything other than pull your money out of your business and hide it because you don't know what is going on or whether you're going to lose your house if you try to invest and trust that the tariff that was there last week is going to be there next week. And so it seems like trying to be economic chaos. And I think the real goal, I saw some study, I should try to find the link and post it in the comments later. During the 2016 era, when Trump was first in the presidency and put up tariffs, he issued so many exemptions to companies specifically based on whether they donated to him or worked with him on different contracts. And so the
Right.
goal is
So
not
it's another
tariff.
grift.
The goal
Yeah.
is, as usual, make sure Trump wins, make sure you have to bow down to him in order for your business to be successful. It's not about increasing manufacturing jobs. It's not about helping the blue collar, the middle or lower class. It's about helping Trump, just like everything else the man does.
Mhm.
Corinne, you've got a high school grad this month.
I sure do.
They're looking forward to screwing iPhones together, right? That's your kid's future.
It's been his dream since he was 3. Yep. I mean, what kind of parent would I be if I did not encourage that? It is an interesting world to have a kid going off to college right now, especially because he's going to a regional campus of an Indiana state school, so he's being very financially conscious about what the choices that he is making, and he is going to study something that he enjoys. But sending him off into this world is a very interesting one. I just keep reminding him that deciding what you're going to be when you grow up is not a one-time process. I'm 41. I have no idea what I'm doing. I have no idea what I will be doing in 5 years. And I think that's one of the greatest parts of life. So just go to school and learn as much as you can and take in as much information as you can and meet new people and learn about their life experiences. But to try to understand what the world will be when he graduates, I am doing a lot of 2008 recession math in my head and knowing how many people came out of school in 2010, 2011 and just, and moved back in with their parents and it became a cliche, but thank goodness they could move back in with their parents, but that was the reality. And so if I'm doing the math and he's a 2029 graduate, because we see how many of these policy changes are taking place down the road. They are really trying to ensure that the Trump legacy and the Republican 2028 presidential candidate is not going to be tainted with these. So you see the backdating, post-dating happening for a lot of these policies. So that is why the tariff thing doesn't seem to be resonating right now, because people don't really have a lot of appreciation of how long things take to really gain momentum and for us to really see consequences on our end. So if I'm looking at a 2029 college grad, what does that look like? What world is that economically? And again, the uncertainty piece that everybody has touched on, all of these businesses making decisions that or not making decisions and being overly cautious, that's a 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 year snowball. And so it's a really, it's a precarious time. And even so my kid, I joked about this when he went into kindergarten, when it said class of 2025, like when you go to kindergarten and roundup and welcome to the class of 2025. And it was just like, that's not a real year. Like, what are we doing here? But so to see, and I have these moments where it kind of crashes on my head, the world that my children understand. Having an 07 and an 09 baby, it's all post 9/11. It's all war on terror. It's all economic downturn. It's all political, discontent. This world is so normal to them. And I really understand. It's fascinating to me to think, who are these kids going to be when they're in their 30s and 40s? Because there is a generational trauma that is happening around economic and international uncertainty that you can't, that's real, and it is going to have implications on the future workforce. I mean, how many of our parents or grandparents are depression kids, and that translated into how we were raised, and we're 100 years out. So that's all of this stuff takes so much time to work through.
It really does. Finally, the last thing I wanted to talk about on the national level, HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. this week said that COVID shots will no longer be recommended for anyone outside of like older adults or people with underlying medical conditions. Now, I'm not a doctor, but I think I know a little bit more about herd immunity than the HHS secretary. Jesse, What the hell, man?
Yeah, I mean, like, I think that there were aspects to how COVID was rolled out that I've talked to people who have legitimate complaints about. It's like, well, we were told that, you could stand 6 feet away and then that would totally limit the spread. We were told that, masks would maybe do more than they actually did. We were told this, we were told that. And part of it, I think, was just emerging science and we didn't know what we were doing. Part of it, though, was, I think, the government intentionally keeping some information back to try to influence people's behavior. And I think people understandably and justifiably were frustrated with that. But so I think that frustration has been,
who was in charge then? I forget.
Say it again.
Who was in charge then? I forget.
Oh yeah, I don't know. I'm pretty sure it was Obama. Yeah, definitely Obama was in charge anytime anything bad happened. Yeah.
Carter, Jimmy Carter was in the mix. We know he was.
Of course. Right. But I think that like genuine frustration, somebody's taken the bellows and are fanning those flames to try to make sure that people are anti-science, anti-government in general, and want to make sure that health authorities are no longer trusted or respected. And I've got a bunch of theories about why, but I think the easiest way is to look at who benefits and where the money goes. If you're going to be making all these cuts to public health, like we're seeing at the state level and at the federal level, that looks really bad if people believe that public health from the government is actually keeping them safe. And so as long as we can muddy the waters and make it seem like, oh, it's big pharma, corrupt bureaucrats, it's people who don't have your family's best interests at stake. And so really, maybe it's better that you do have less of this public health money coming in. That's how you make these cuts to keep the rich getting richer. And I mean, they've made it long since clear that they're very fine with a lot of poor people dying. But if you look, I mean, like the rich still want their folks vaccinated. They still want people wearing masks around them. Like they understand the science and they are taking precautions accordingly. They just don't really care whether or not the rest of us do. So that's my take.
Yeah. So Trish, what's the appeal with Kennedy? Why do people like him? I mean, I think there's a bit of, he has a point, and it's always like kind of there's a kernel of truth in anything with these folks when he talks about big pharma being corrupt and having too much influence. Yeah, it's true. But this is the way to handle it. Yeah. Huh?
He's imposing his own personal, unscientific philosophies with a direct impact on the health of Americans.
Yes.
And, that is, and then he says, don't take medical advice from me. And so, it's just so weird.
Oh,
but the two things about this situation that I find, excuse me, I'm sorry, very troubling. Number one, the telling Moderna not to work on bird flu. I mean, once again, we're tying this back to Indiana. We have a lot of poultry farms here. We have a lot of egg farms here. We need good scientific answers to bird flu. And that, once again, his idea about herd immunity is insane. It's just insane. Let it run through your entire inventory of animals, and the ones who live are going to somehow be superior. No, that's not how it works. So that's number one.
Chickens.
And second of all, regardless of how one feels about fluoride in water, and I know there's some controversy about that, I do want to say this. There are cases in pediatric dental care where it needs to be prescribed for children with certain conditions that are evaluated by people with actual medical degrees. And Robert F. Kennedy has instructed the FDA to pull those prescription medications off the market. This is getting right in the middle of the doctor-patient relationship, which is everything that they want to do. They want to do that with women. They want to do that with every kind of personal medical decision. So, I can't wait till this guy decides he wants to go back to Central Park and look for dead animals or something.
Corinne, I have an interesting theory with Kennedy.
Okay.
So, now at one point in his career, he was a legitimate environmental lawyer.
Yes.
I think that Kennedy is such a radical environmental extremist that he wants to kill all the people So we'll quit damaging the environment.
You know what? And I think that we end the show right here and we say RFK Jr. is brilliant, and that's the end of it. It's a super. I mean, looking at his career, and it is very interesting to see the different cases that he has handled, the different clients that he has had over the years.
Mhm.
What I find so fascinating about RFK Jr. as just as a person and as related to the family legacy is how much addiction and substance abuse disorders have played a role in
Mhm.
his career and in his personal life. And you can see this if you spend 5 minutes looking at his social media. It is very clear that he is somebody who goes all in, whether it is substances, whether it is law school, whether it is environmental causes, or now this health and, however he is, this wellness thing. He goes all in. I mean, his workout stuff, his diet, there's an obsession
All in on bush meat.
Yep. There's an obsession level that you see in people who tend to have addictive personalities and are more prone to substance abuse disorders because they have to be narrowly focused because that's their addiction for the time. And I don't know if anybody saw this. I am a huge Curb Your Enthusiasm fan. The fact that he is married to Cheryl Hines is still something I cannot make heads or tails of. But when she was doing a video on Instagram and he is showering behind her and she is hawking some kind of like a beauty product, this is real, y'all. She is standing in a camera. He is behind her in a shower. Obviously, her head is covering all of the things that cannot be shown. But it's such a stark reminder that they are getting you to not trust the mainstream so they can sell you crap. And this is just the latest expression of his obsessive personality. And because he has always been in a wealthy, privileged position to exercise his latest whim, this is the latest whim. He is able to kind of flex this on a national and international stage. And this is one of my favorite stats that I bring up all the time. And I pulled it up just so I had the numbers right. The pharmaceutical industry, the big pharma, the evil pharma, right? The pharmaceutical industry in 2023 was worth $1.6 trillion. Okay. 1.6 trillion. The wellness industry, the unregulated wellness industry of supplements and classes and programs, 6.3 trillion in 2023.
Damn.
So when you talk about who is the behemoth in the room, who is really punching above their weight, it's not the pharmaceutical industry. There are a litany of issues with pharmaceuticals. Absolutely. It is corrupt. My husband is French, and every time he is here and he sees a pharmaceutical ad on TV, blows his mind. That because the US and New Zealand, the only countries in the world that advertise pharmaceuticals on television. So he's just like, what is with all these drug ads? I'm like, yeah, it's the US. That's what we do here. So the huge problems with the pharmaceutical industry, but they are not the ones that are exploiting people to the extent that the wellness industry is. And when you look at supplements are great, Eastern medicine, holistic medicine, there are many advantages to that, but it's so expensive. And when you look at what is not covered by health insurance, your wellness retreats, your diet programs, your supplements, that's all out of pocket. And so it's just when you compare 1.6 trillion to 6.3 trillion, it's very obvious where the money is being made.
Wow. Good stuff. Thanks for those stats, Corinne. I do want to move on now. We are, almost 45 minutes in already. That puts us at about the halfway point. And I want to move on to our Indiana stories and a little segment I like to call Around the Corn. And in this one, since we are running a little long right now, I want to go through these sort of. I'm going to give each of you your own headline, and we're maybe cut out all the extra discussion around each one, just so we have enough time to get to our one big thing today. So, first of all, sort of along these the lines of our MAGA government officials really knowing what's best for your body, Indiana is I want to say we're the first state to do this. Got a special waiver from HHS to ban candy and soda from SNAP purchases. Now, your first thought is, well, I mean, yeah, I guess that sort of makes sense. Trish, is this like government overreach into your personal decisions, or do they really kind of have a point? Where do you fall on this thing?
Where I fall on this thing is whoever decided this doesn't know about food deserts. Number one, they do not know that you can buy a 6-pack of Coke for less than a gallon of milk. I saw somebody say that you can buy the ingredients for a birthday cake and make that instead of buying a cake already made. Maybe they don't know that in poor households, they may not even have cake pans. Or a mixer, or the time to make a birthday cake. And this is not going to change behavior. What will happen is people will use their own money to buy these products. I mean, maybe some people will change, and maybe yay for them. I don't know. But it's not going to have the desired outcome, which is to change people's behaviors to eat healthier. It's just going to force them to spend more of their limited income on things that their family needs and wants. And for goodness sakes, why shouldn't people be able to give treats to their children? It's heartless. That's my feeling.
Yeah, and really what they're doing, they're ascribing systemic problems to individual failings. Mm-hmm. And this is sort of the conservative playbook. It's the neoliberal playbook. And along these lines, Jesse, while they're saying, okay, well, you can't buy this, you can't buy that, they're also taking potential healthy food out of kids' mouths this summer with the Sunbucks program. They're Braun and Beckwith are now blaming the Whitcomb administration for dropping the ball on this. Is this a matter of they're finding an excuse after receiving pushback, or is the Whitcomb administration really bearing some blame on this?
I mean, it's so hard to say, but I think that from what I saw, it looked like there was an application that was due in January that didn't get completed, and then there was lack of follow-up in the future. And so I think it's probably a 1-2 punch. I'm sure Whitcomb's folks could have done more. I'm sure the Braun folks are the ones really responsible, and they could have and should have done more. And then also, I wouldn't be surprised if normally in a functioning federal government, there were a lot more check-ins to be like, hey, did you want help getting this completed? But instead, we're too busy playing games and shutting the federal government down in piecemeal portions. And so federal employees were probably worried about their jobs and not as on the ball as they normally would have been for this. And again, who suffers? It's children, right? It's children. And, I'll be the first as a politician. I make mistakes. I have not ever made a mistake that caused children to go hungry, thank God. But when you make mistakes, you have to own it, and you have to talk about how we're going to do things differently. And instead, I haven't seen the Braun administration really own this mistake at all, or talk about what they're going to do to make it right or prevent it from happening in the future. This is one of a bunch of different things. I'm going to break the around the corn rules and talk about a couple other quick things. There was a program, an energy efficiency program. And I know I was paying very close attention to it because as a full-time elected official, I'm broke enough to receive, the ability to apply for some of these. It was supposed to come out in the first quarter of this year, which would help people with low income get a new electric stove if they're going to replace their natural gas one. That helps for health concerns, that helps lower bills, that helps encourage solar. There's a bunch of different things. It's federal dollars, so the state wasn't losing anything from it. It just finally went live at the end of May. It was supposed to be in the first quarter. And there were no updates, no explanation of what was going wrong or when the new deadline was. It just said coming soon. And, this is the kind of thing where conservatives talk a lot about like running the government like a business. If any business treated its customers that way, it would go out of business, right? So they're acting more like a one-party dictatorship. And this is the socialists saying this is a problem, right? It's a one-party state where they know they don't have any competition, and so they don't have to compete for your goodwill or for your good feelings, right?
Yeah,
and I'll jump.
it's sad.
Sorry, Scott. I'm going to break the rules too, but Jesse did it, so I want to. No,
We're off the rails now.
I know. I'm so sorry, but I have been obsessed with this Sunbucks story because, so the federal deadline was February 15th. The Braun administration sent a letter to the USDA declining participation for the summer on February 20th. So they already missed the 15th deadline by 5 days, and then they actively declined on February 20th. And just from like a marketing communications perspective, y'all have had 4 months. You couldn't come up with anything better than, oh, it's Holcomb's fault. Like, come on. Like, come on. It's so obvious that it's not Holcomb's fault. And yes, the way that the cycle goes, most decisions when it comes to vendors and administrative rollout should have been made in like October or November of last year. But it is very normal for a previous administration to kind of set up all those blocks and then just say, but we're not pulling the trigger. That's the next administration to do, because they don't want to step on the toes of the next administration. That's my guess that that's what happened. And Mike Braun and his administration were too focused on installing a freaking helipad at his house, on making sure that the 0 trans women who play sports in the state of Indiana right now are not allowed to, even though there are 0, making sure abortion records are public, making sure state employees cannot work remotely. All of these executive orders, he's issued over 60 executive orders, and hungry kids was nowhere near the top of that priority list for such an outwardly Christian projecting person. It's really, really, it's such a stupid response. And when Beckwith was at his town hall blaming the previous administration, I'm like, come on. Like you said, Jesse, it's so easy to just say, you know what, y'all, administration's transition, we dropped the ball and we're sorry. And here's what we're going to do.
Can I jump in? I'm sorry. I just have to do this because this is so reminiscent of, I literally cried when I heard that Indiana missed the deadline for the Gear Up grant of federal money to fund 21st century scholars. This happened when I was working at the Department of Education. And the story in the news was that there was a computer glitch and our application didn't get in on time. And, oh, too bad. It's a 7-year cycle on this. It was multiple millions of dollars. And when we had those federal funds, there were 62 counselors statewide helping parents, helping students, helping school counselors understand what it takes for a student to make it all the way through high school, meet the criteria of 21st century scholars, and go to college. The state only paid for the tuition. The state did not pay for any of these other things. So after we didn't get that Gear Up grant, we went down to one person and a computer system. So being the person I am, I called a friend of mine who works for Andre Carson. And I said, did anybody from higher education call you about this problem? And they said, we get a lot of calls from entities at the state level that have issues with filing applications for grants. We never received anything from the Commission on Higher Education. So this is also like when Mike Pence said, no, we don't want $90 million for preschool. This is their whole game plan. They do not want these resources to come to our state. And so I'm not surprised by this son thing. And I will tell you, I'm very happy because I was involved with a program, a summer lunch program down in Austin, Indiana. They made up their funds so they can continue to offer their program, but they were not able to depend on the support that they have had for years and years.
So it pushes the problem out to all these little communities that don't have the resources. Everybody's got to scramble, and
It's
it's
the
just
kindness of strangers.
willfully hurting people. I mean,
is.
I can't put it any other way.
And there's one thing that I will agree with our dear Lieutenant Governor Micah Beckwith about is when he was at his town hall and he said, it is really disappointing to see Indiana pay into a federal program and not get anything in return, because that is what we're doing. Hoosiers have paid into this and we don't get anything back. So he's right on that one. But then, of course, grifter's gonna grift. And he used it as an opportunity to say, well, this is why nonprofits and churches need to step up, because they can do it so much better than the government can. And I'm sorry, dude, there is nothing easier than people just having an extra $120 on their EBT card. There is no food pantry distribution door to door that has to happen there. So that he completely lost me there. Like, this is not an example of government not doing something well. This is an example of the Braun administration making a mistake, refusing to take responsibility for it, and then saying, well, you can go to your local elementary school and grab a meal. But that was the whole point, is that so many people don't have the transportation to get there. They should have an extra box of mac and cheese in the pantry.
Right.
Yeah. So, so there's your Braun Beckwith shenanigans. In other parts of that administration, hey, Diego Morales is in the news a couple times this week. Once he's being investigated by the Marion County election board. So this is just a county thing, not the state thing, and they're investigating whether he used video from an official visit in a campaign ad. It sounds like a minor violation in the scope of all the corrupt things Diego does. Jesse, that's your neck of the woods. Has this thing got any teeth?
I mean, maybe. To me, it reminds me of going after Al Capone for tax fraud, right? It's like, whether it's true or not, it's kind of irrelevant because the guy's so obviously a crook that, it should be like, well, we're going to peg him on this thing while we're looking at him for his obvious failures and corruption. And we've had some Democrats calling him out on that, which I'm glad about. We've suspiciously had very few Republicans willing to call a spade and point out. Yeah, I know, right? The true truth-loving Republicans aren't somehow holding their own accountable, but maybe later on I'll talk about we have that problem on the Democratic side for some of our Democratic wrongdoers. But, I think that anybody paying attention should realize when you already have supermajority control and the governorship in a state, you don't need to circle the wagon so much that you excuse obviously corrupt behavior. Giving your brother-in-law jobs, buying luxury SUVs, going off and hobnobbing with foreign officials on your personal time. The guy's just a crook. He's obviously a crook. And every Republican I know who talks about it behind closed doors admits that. They know better, and they're just hoping that their voters aren't paying enough attention to realize that they're using the same party line and that they aren't getting any obvious open opposition. And, right now we have a political climate in Indiana where we're not holding elected officials accountable to pull in or kick out the people on their same side of the fence who are doing obvious wrong things. We're making it too much of a team sport. And this is one way that it's having a bad impact. And I'll talk about other ways later on. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Along the lines of Diego, so Jesse sort of hinted at this. He's over in Europe right now doing some jet setting. That's fine. It's his personal time. Maybe he's just over in Hungary visiting the in-laws. But while he was there on his personal time, just enjoying his vacation, Diego shows up at CPAC in Hungary. First of all, why are they having CPAC in Hungary? But what's going on there? What's he doing?
Oh my gosh. So Hungary is a very interesting place to hold CPAC because Hungary has a Christian nationalist government in charge. And when you look at kind of the Holy Land for people like Vance and Trump and Beckwith and Braun and Rokita, it is what Hungary has. It is a Christian nationalist theocracy in charge. So it makes sense that Hungary would host CPAC. And Hungary over the last several elections has gone closer and closer and closer and closer, and then they finally got into power. So he's there and he's talking about immigration, which his catchphrase was "no border, no order," and because both he and his wife are immigrants. She's a Hungarian, like you said, Scott. Maybe they're visiting the in-laws. His wife is a Hungarian immigrant. But to go to Hungary, Christian nationalists, U.S. goals for some people. That's really what they want to instill here, and to talk about immigration. Was very, very bizarre, but it just shows why immigration continues to be such a successful political talking point. There is no interest on the Republican side, on the right, to actually fix the immigration system or address the problems with it, because if they fix it, they don't get to use it as a pawn. They're using it as a pawn again in the Medicaid debate. No, we're not cutting Medicaid. We're just kicking those immigrants off of it. No, you're not. That's not what we know that's not what you're doing, but everyone is now like, oh yeah, well, the immigrants are getting it. So because it works, it's a successful political talking point. And so, yeah, for him, yeah, is this your personal time, Diego? Is this your job? Like, what are you doing over there? But it was the Hungary connection. I was like, oh, ding, ding, ding. There it is. This is the vision for so many of these Christian nationalists in the U.S.
Yeah, they loves them some Viktor Orban. Last thing here in this segment, Trish. Let's maybe quit picking on the Republicans for all their blatant corruption for just a moment and talk about Indianapolis, where a report issued after a long investigation by an outside legal firm found that Mayor Joe Hogsett's administration didn't technically violate the law in handling sexual harassment complaints against Hogsett's former chief of staff, Thomas Cook. So they're in the clear, right, Trish? Everything's good?
Does my face say it all? Democrats are supposed to be the party representing the interests of people who have experienced discrimination, abuse, and any other kind of bad behavior. I don't see that happening in this situation. I will say that Thomas Cook, I'll use his name, is a person of bad character. He is a person of very bad character. So I think it's incumbent on everyone to choose very carefully with whom you associate. And when you give responsibility to someone who has proven to have very bad decision-making and bad character, and you continue to support them, then you are complicit in the bad behavior.
You're so right, Trish. And what I think was so frustrating to go through some of the elements of that report was it was definitely designed to exonerate individuals, right? To say Mayor Hogsett did nothing wrong, so-and-so did nothing wrong. And I get that it wasn't the job of the report to do this, but it completely ignored the systemic pieces that are in place that allow this kind of behavior to continue. And the Democrats are not above the law here. We have Senator Greg Taylor, we have Senator David Niezgodski, we have people who have shown their failings publicly and have never faced any consequences. And so the system that is in place is not being reflected upon, I think, in with the gravitas that it needs, because this is not about, we get into this conversation when it comes to systemic racism, to systemic police bias, to there are systems in place that are bigger than individuals. And when people do not recognize why an individual is making a choice because they're reacting in the system, then we don't fix the bigger problem. And I know that's not the design of the report, but it feels like there are too many individuals coming out and saying, see, I told you.
No problem here.
I didn't do it. I'm not a badman, right? I didn't do it.
I have to go.
And Jesse, you can maybe speak on this, because this report, this outside investigation, cost something like $500,000.
$450,000. Yeah. And so we spent $450,000. And why? when we look at the report, and Corinne got it right, it was designed to exonerate people on a strict legal basis. The report was chock full of little things like, well, we can't comment on the ethics or the, like whether this was a good idea on a moral level to hire a campaign donor to do the investigation, to never talk to the person who made the accusation and to rely on her social media instead. There's also, so I was actually in the committee room when that report was received, sitting with a group of survivors of harassment, abuse, and similar behavior from the Hogsett administration, including people who experienced harassment while this report was going on. So long after Thomas Cook was out of the picture, the culture is the same. It hasn't changed. Yep. And the only reason we had this investigative committee happen, I'll take a little bit of credit here, and I just think that I'm correct. I called for Mayor Hogsett to resign. Until that point, I had the group chat messages to prove it. No other Democrat in the city county council was willing to do a damn thing about this. And so once I said it publicly, and my constituents, I got hundreds of messages thanking me for the courage of doing the right thing and agreeing the mayor needed to step down. No other politician, Republican or Democrat, has said that as of this point, even still. And so we spent $450,000 taxpayer dollars to try to pass the buck along, let the media decide whether or not he was going to have to resign or not, so that no politician would have to spend political capital to say and do what was obvious to anybody who's not in politics. So, the report's in now. I think it wasn't incorrect to just receive the report, let everybody process it and then see what happens. But I'm calling everybody out. If we allow this to just move and like, we'll make some HR tweaks in the future, that is bullshit. And we just absolutely cannot abide by that.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jesse. So moving on to our one big thing today, and we're actually going to stay right in Indianapolis, right here in Jesse's wheelhouse, because we're talking about the ongoing attack on public education in the state. And Democrats are supposed to be the party that stands up for public education.
Yeah.
Yet, in Indianapolis, we know the State House tried to kill IPS this year. They didn't get that through, but we've got this new is it a board, basically, the ILEA, appointed by Mayor Hogsett to sort of coordinate the sharing of resources between IPS public schools and charter schools. The makeup of this board seems exceptionally charter friendly, if one might say. Jesse, I'm gonna come back to you here because you are intimately involved with this and you know what's going on. Do you want to take over from me and go in a little more depth there?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're right. Well, and I just want to take a step back and talk about how this ILEA got created. From everything I've seen, it actually was an idea that was come up with by IPS school board commissioners. And I will give them the benefit of the doubt and assume that they had good faith and believed the media reports about how, well, really, charter people just want what's best for children. And so, we just have to work together and sit around the table together to just find the best course of action. And, I have my opinions on how you could come to that conclusion if you've read the news and paid any attention to financial receipts here. But let's say that was the truth. The original way that the Republicans in our state house tried to push this through was that Governor Braun was going to be the leader and he was going to appoint a bunch of people from on high. That was set up so that even like people like Ed Delaney, who normally are huge champions of public education, ended up sponsoring and voting for a revised version of the ILEA that put Mayor Hogsett as the chair of this committee. And so, we're once again, just like the dynamic at the State House, where we have this horrible looking bill that would just literally kill IPS right away. We could pretend like that's a victory that goes away, even though it was never intended to pass. And instead, this horrific thing that would have otherwise looked like the trash it is, looks like a victory compared to where we moved the anchoring position here. So now we've got this 9-person board. Mayor Hogsett sits as the chair and appoints 5 people. Now I'm going to screw that up. I'll link to my email about it because I go into depth. But several of these people are either the founder of the Mind Trust, Bart Peterson. We've got somebody who sits on the board of the Mind Trust and who I think is just absolutely selling out public education, and has been for years, which is Democratic Majority Leader of the City County Council, Maggie Lewis. And then the list goes on and on. The number of Mind Trust connections is really just absolutely unbelievable. And so, Scott, you mentioned, well, they tried to kill IPS, but instead we got this. This is killing IPS. This is absolutely killing IPS.
Yeah.
I sat and had breakfast.
Just bleed it slowly instead of stabbing it like in the front. Yeah.
Right. It's insisting IPS come to dinner where poison is served. Right. And so, they get to sit around the table and talk with the people who are openly plotting to kill them, and then let those people decide in which manner they're going to do that. And so, whether Superintendent Dr. Alicia Johnson of IPS knows that and is, I just think that IPS needs to be calling the bluff and saying this is an illegitimate institution. And, you could tell that they're up to no good because Mayor Joe Hogsett, according to Republicans, but he hasn't denied it, went out of his way to ask to make sure that these meetings are not subject to the open door law, which means they're making decisions about where taxpayers' money goes behind closed doors. Taxpayers don't get to see what they're talking about or who's saying what. Why not? Why not? You absolutely should have the right to know how these conversations are happening. And again, if everybody just is sitting with their own perspective, and I'm not saying, most people in Indianapolis would say, draw and quarter every charter executive, right? Like maybe we want some charter schools to continue to exist, but why can't we all sit around the table publicly and you get to hear all the arguments if it's really just a meeting of the minds and trying to find something out? The lie is very obviously shown by just the way that they're trying to operate, which again, I think is par for the course for this mayor. It was recent. I've been an anti-charter school kind of zealot for quite a while because I worked in a charter school for 3.5 years and saw how poorly teachers and students are treated there. But it wasn't until this year that I realized just how out of line Indiana is with almost every state in the country. Indianapolis makes like international news. I saw a broadcast from Canada talking about how Indianapolis was the area where the Liberal Party, the Democrats, actually were pushing for school privatization, which they couldn't understand how we could get away with that. I don't understand it either. Our local reporting acts like it's normal that we're having these conversations, even while we're having charter executives routinely just laugh in our faces, steal money from the public, and get away with it. So I've been talking a lot. I'll let other people talk, but I could go on all day.
Yeah, Trish, what you got?
I just want to put a big view on this because the technical definition of ILEA, the LEA part of it is Local Education Authority. This means that not just state dollars, but federal dollars. The federal dollars go to the LEA. In every county, you have your different school boards, corporations, and all that. They are LEAs. They receive the federal money, the Title I, Title II, Title VII. They are the ones that get the federal money. So with this naming of an ILEA for Indianapolis that includes charter schools, they are really breaking through on funding. There are two other things that are on the horizon for public education funding, and I think it's very important. And thank you for putting this up, the ICPE. If you're not a member of the Indiana Coalition for Public Education, please join, because that's where you'll get this very important information. On the horizon, they didn't get it through this session, but they will next session, is mandatory school consolidation. In counties of fewer than 50,000 people, which there are 50 in Indiana, they will be forced to have one school corporation. Now, maybe some people think this sounds like a very efficient way to do things, but as long as they allow for-profit charter schools with 85 kids in a school district with other public schools right there in walking distance, I think that is hypocrisy at the least. So that's one thing. And then the next thing is, if your school district has 50% plus one students enrolled in a charter school, your entire school corporation has to become a charter school corporation. So we look at this, we see the camel's nose under the tent with what's going on in Indianapolis, and then we see universal vouchers, which are definitely happening next year. And you can see right now, we have $500 million going to private schools, religious schools, philosophical schools, and anybody of any income can get these vouchers. But the hypocrisy once again is low-income families cannot afford the rest of the tuition. Their student's going to get like between $6,000 and maybe $9,000 for this voucher but you know, Park Tutors, name a private school, their tuition is $30,000 a year. So it's not addressing what they are selling. They're selling this.
Yeah, it's a gift. It's a gift to people who are already in private schools who could already afford to pay for their private schools, and they're just getting a sweet discount on everybody's dime. Yeah.
So just to come back to what Jesse said, or was it Corinne? I can't remember. That Indiana is, doing things. We are the lab for privatizing education nationwide. Yeah. We have more charter schools. We have a stronger voucher system. Kentucky just rejected voucher systems. Yep. We are on the cutting edge of privatizing education. We will be like India, where you have to pay to send your kid to school. And that's where we're headed.
And what frustrates me so much about this public education conversation in Indiana, because you are spot on, Trish, that we're the laboratory, right? This is where school choice and school vouchers have been tested out and then kind of taken to other states. What blows my mind is nobody can point to any data that is showing this is improving educational outcomes, period. There is no evidence. And when you take a case study and you compare Indiana to the state of Massachusetts, because people always like to say, when you look at education systems in other countries, well, you can't compare that to the US. They're more homogenous than we are. We're too diverse, yada, yada. Okay, let's look at Massachusetts. They had very similar issues in the early to mid 1990s that Indiana was facing. Because Indiana in the early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s, we were facing academic decline, reading standard decline. We kind of didn't know what to do. And Massachusetts in the early 90s doubled down on public education and reinvested in public education. They started paying their teachers more, treating them like professionals, like lawyers and doctors, as they should be treated. And they doubled down, and their academic outcomes have skyrocketed over the last 30 years. Massachusetts students compete internationally. They take the PISA test. If Massachusetts was its own country, it would be competing internationally with how well their students perform. And here in Indiana, we said, well, public education must be broken. So let's go ahead and punish teachers and blame parents and talk about how stupid these kids are and out of control these kids are. And then we have to so they took a philosophical approach, because this is how they feel. They want more money to go to their religious organizations, and they found a mechanism to do it. And it was, again, just like the pharmaceutical conversation, just like the mainstream media conversation, just like the finance conversation. I'm going to convince you that all of these systems that you know are corrupt, so you will go pay for my alternative. Right. And I am going to convince you that public education is actually the problem because they're making your kids gay. So kids are making your kids gay. June 1st, y'all, happy Pride. Public schools making your kids gay. So are the libraries. And so are the TVs, FYI. Lieutenant Governor Beckwith just warned us about that. But so we're going to tell you that this institution is corrupt. And by default, the alternative we are offering to you is virtuous. And that is not true. And what really continues to, and I'm so glad to get Jesse and Trish's perspective on this, because being up in Northern Indiana, we are not a part of the Indianapolis hub, but Indianapolis is the hub for the state. Right. And what I see the city of Indianapolis trying to do, and that is trying to educate and care for the most diverse population in this state. And what they are trying to do is not replicable to other areas of the state. And I think that there's a place for a nuanced conversation, but we can't have nuanced conversations, right? We have to have black and white. We have to have good and evil. We have to know who the good guys and the bad guys are. There is a nuanced conversation that should be happening surrounding education. Let's talk about how education in the 2020s is very different than the 1990s, and how do we address the differences? Our population is very different. Our income levels are different. Our languages are different. Abandoning public education has never led to successful educational outcomes. You can look at other countries and other states, it never has. And so when people, again, grifters gonna grift. Capitalism is going to capital, and they are going to find a way to make money. And this is just another in. And I'm so glad you brought up Kentucky, Trish, because Kentucky, hands down, over 60% of voters said F you to using public funds to pay for private schools.
Right.
And when you look at the counties who voted 80% for Donald Trump and also voted 80% against school vouchers,
Right.
the reason they said, you're not taking my money to give kids in Louisville and Frankfurt a choice, because we don't have a choice. We have one school in our county. And not only is it our school, it's our public meeting area, it's our community basketball games, it's our fundraisers, it's our yard sale location. That's our school. You don't get to come into our community and take our school.
Right.
So when you see all of these other communities around the state now paying into this education bucket for it to be divvied up, given to private institutions, because like Scott said, wealthy families, because that top 3%, that is who just got included in the new voucher program.
Mm-hmm.
These are millionaires who will now be getting a coupon, and their schools just raise their tuition the amount of that coupon because they know how much their families can pay.
Right.
So it's a bonus for these schools, and it is just continuing to deteriorate education for everybody else. The other piece of this, and I'm so sorry, I'm on a soapbox, I can't get off. But the other piece of this that I think is so incredibly harmful is school choice. Even before the vouchers came in, being able to send your choice, right? Being able to send your kid anywhere you wanted to was pre-2010. That was a 2008, 2009 thing. So we're looking at an entire generation of kids who did not go to school with the people they live around. Right. You're looking at a fracturing and a fragmenting of the community.
Resegregation.
Yeah. Yes, resegregation. And you are poking holes in the community fabric that we have all relied upon. And that goes beyond academics. That is dismantling social circles and communities when you do not go to school with the kids you live by, and when you do not know the parents that you live around, because you're not meeting at the bus stop, you're not going to the luncheons, you're not going to the fundraisers. And that is deteriorating community networking, I think, in a very intentional way. Let's make us more siloed and isolated.
Exactly. Yeah, it's atomizing, and it really, it's sort of, this is how like neoliberalism and then fascism works, is it divides communities. It makes us atomized, and if we don't have solidarity, we're easier to control. Trish, you wanted to say something.
Yes, I want to tell you about a dream I had the other night. I don't know if you all know Teresa Kendall. She ran for the House down in Jasper area. She's an educator, former educator. She and I are very good friends. And I had a dream that Teresa authored a very comprehensive, nationally acclaimed survey on education gap among students of color and income and all that. That was the last dream I had before I woke up. And then I started thinking about this. Are y'all familiar with the complexity formula for schools? Mm-hmm. The complexity formula addresses poverty and other student characteristics that would indicate that school corporation needs more funding to educate its population. You know what that's about? That's about DEI. I see, and here you go, if there's even Republicans listening to this, why don't you just, the other thing is the disaggregation of data at the Department of Education is where we see these needs. We will see the test scores. We will see the numbers of kids who are on free or reduced lunch. All these things that inform the public about the characteristics of our students and where this help is needed. You know, if you really are devoted to DEI, to doing away with DEI, then you will not have the complexity formula, and you will not disaggregate this data, and we will fall farther and farther behind, because guess what? People who live outside of Indianapolis or the big cities, your rural schools need that complexity formula to educate your kids. So don't go thinking that DEI is just a thing to help minorities in big cities, because that is not what's happening. So that's my little soapbox telling you about my dream. And I'll shut up now.
No, you make a very good point. I think we had a story about this a couple weeks ago where they killed a rural broadband program. Mm-hmm. Well, that's DEI. You know, we're trying to make broadband more inclusive so the whole state can have access to it. So, you know, equity for rural folks. And because and look, at its base, it's racism, right? Oh, DEI means black, right? That's what they're saying. And so you kill DEI programs, you wind up shooting yourself in the foot by killing programs that help your rural community.
I would say that, though, in Indiana, the equity part is more important. It's economic discrimination.
Yes.
More than anything else. It is who's educated, who's not, who's making money, who's not. And that is, if we don't address that equity issue, we're just going to fall. We're going to somehow manage to get behind Mississippi.
Yeah, the rural schools and the inner city schools suffer from the same lack of resources. Right. Maybe not in the same ways, but right. They are both underprivileged in their own ways. Jesse, I haven't heard from you in a while.
Yeah, I mean, Corinne, you said it so well. Trish, you said it so well. So I just kind of want to double down on everything you're saying. But the one thing I was thinking about as well was, Corinne, you said something earlier about how it's not that people are getting dumber, it's that people are overwhelmed with all the different pieces of information and media that are out there, and it's hard to tell what's true and what's false. And I think that the whole charter school situation plays into that quite a bit as well, because charter schools spend massive amounts of money in marketing. You can't go down the street in Indianapolis without seeing billboards for different schools. And what can you actually communicate about how a school is different or better on a billboard or on a radio ad? You can't. You're just hoping to, again, flashing lights and bright noises so that parents feel like, oh man, my child isn't doing well at school. Maybe that's my fault. Maybe this is a school choice thing and I should have just sent my kid to another school. I've got, family members of my own who are in that same spot. My nephew is at one school and they're talking about bringing him to another school because he's not doing so well there. But when you just pick up and move children around like puzzle pieces, trying to figure out where they fit best, sometimes it just takes time, and it takes the whole community coming together. And then, as Corinne and Trish said earlier, when you atomize everybody and just treat schooling like it's an individual's choice, and really, it doesn't matter what's right for everyone. We just, you can pick and choose, and I'm sure you'll find one someday if you just switch schools every single year. That does not do well for students. That doesn't do well for families. All that does is put more money into the people's pockets who are now spending a ton of money on marketing and ads, which means IPS and other public schools have to suddenly market the concept of public education. And we treat them like, oh, well, you're just, you're the Burger King, they're McDonald's. And so you've got to compete for the share of wallet. And that's just a ridiculous way to think about our children, frankly.
And it's also like the idea that like my kid is more special than yours, because I must love them more. I'm going to exercise my choice. I must love them more. There is absolutely no understanding of the communal role that public education is supposed to play, and how much everyone's outcomes improve when we are all given similar access. I mean, we had this conversation in the 1950s. Separate cannot be equal. We are re-segregating. I mean, we reached the peak. It's crazy to me. I think 1988, I believe I was in kindergarten. That was the peak of racial integration. We have becoming more segregated every single year since I was in kindergarten. And that is because it's on economic lines, it's on financial lines. Separate cannot be equal. When are we going to? So we're creating a private voucher system and now a public school system. Separate. Right. It will never be equal. We've already come to this conclusion.
Right. Yeah. Well, I'm gonna unfortunately have to leave it there. A great closing there, Corinne. I appreciate all of you, Trish Whitcomb, Corinne Straight, Jesse Brown. It has been a pleasure to have all of you on the panel this week. Hopefully we'll have some better news to talk about next week when we will have an all new panel. Until that time, on behalf of all of you, on behalf of my panel here today, I want to wish everybody a great rest of their weekend. Go Pacers. Until next week, love each other, Indiana. All right. And